Welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls, and I'm your host. And today I have an incredibly special guest on. This guy has co-authored more than 30, that's right, 30, more than 30 books, sold millions of copies of said books around the globe, and just a fantastic human being. I have Mr. John David Mann, and with an appropriate last name because he is the man. So do me a favor and share this out. This is going to be a great, great interview. We're going to have a lot of fun. So share this out. See you in a minute. And we're back. Let me bring John onto the show. John David Mann, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I look forward someday to being one of those walls that gets smashed. I love that opening, man. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. I had somebody, a friend of mine, Craig Duswalt, sends me a text message and he says, "How on God's green earth am I not in one of those openers?"
Those spots cost, right? You got to pay for those.
That's
spots.
Right. 1.7 million and you're in. So John, first off, thank you for coming on today. There's the inimitable Ben Gay III. Ben, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come on here today and chat with everybody and tell your story. I'm looking forward to going through some of it. So let's start with where you were born and raised.
Yeah, I come from an undistinguished background. Well, that's not true. The background is distinguished. I was undistinguished. I was born as a child, as you know, and in that gets them every time.
Here we go.
And in Summit, New Jersey, in central New Jersey. I am a Jersey boy.
Wow.
And grew up there. My dad was a musicologist, a fairly famous musicologist and a choral conductor. Very fine choral conductor. He conducted choirs of world renown in his time as a specialist in Baroque music, Bach and Handel, and so forth.
Wow.
My mom was a school teacher and musician and a playwright. She wrote children's plays, but plays on serious topics like Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and all kinds of things. So she was a playwright. It's just that she believed that kids could do serious theater. And didn't just have to do, little kids musicals. So that.
Do you see the comment on the screen?
I see that. There she is. Wow, she's on the show. Look at her.
We love you too.
Oh my goodness! I just saw her. This is so great. Well, now you and I are just going to blush through the whole show right now.
Now you have to be honest.
Gosh.
Your wife is watching.
I know. It's true. I am nothing without her.
That's so funny. So
I grew up in New Jersey. That's where it started.
With musical parents.
Correct. Musical and literate parents. Music was always my background. I started out as a professional musician. I have on numerous podcasts, I have said that my career has been like a pinball game. I've gone bang, 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 and done many different things in my life, drawn by interests and curiosities that I've had. I started out as a classical musician, which was a pretty conventional track for my family. I played the cello. I was a composer. I won some international awards when I was a young teenager, true Jersey boy, when I was 13. And so I was really headed for a career as a classical musician. And I got offered a couple of positions for teaching composition at a couple of colleges, which was weird because I didn't finish high school. I dropped out of high school in my junior year to band together with a few friends and start our own high school. We were unhappy with the schools we were in, and wanted to create a school of our own where we could really learn and study like anything. So we did. We built this school, and in my senior year, I went to it as a student in its first year. And after I graduated from that school, because we did offer our diplomas, we did graduate our students. We did have adults on our faculty. We had a massive cadre of volunteer teachers from our parents and all their fields of expertise. Everything from sewing to computer programming to contemporary American literature to foreign languages to you name it, we had it.
Wait. Can we back up for a second? Did you just say you dropped out of high school to start your own high school?
That is
how did the New Jersey government look at that? I mean, how does that even happen?
I guess this is where it gets a little unconventional.
I love it. Yeah, please tell.
The government really didn't. I don't think they noticed. I learned. I came to my parents and said in my sophomore year that I wanted to drop out of school, and I told them why, and they said okay. And then we found out that wasn't legal. I had to go. We had to go in New Jersey at any rate. I had to go to school till a certain age, which was I think 16. And so in my junior year, I was able to drop out, and I did. And I was the only one of our group of a dozen or so who actually left school to focus full time on our school. We hired, yes, Jackie, this is true, made our own high school. We hired, and I put the word hired in quotes because there was no money involved. We hired an amazing man, a novelist named Julian Thompson, probably my first encounter with a real live novelist, who came on as our director. And Julian and I worked together for months and months and months, and did the fundraising and did the research and did the outreach and gathered a student body. And the following September, we opened our doors. And we, as I say, I went to it as a senior, graduated in the first graduating class, and then I went back and joined the faculty. So I was in the faculty of that school for a year. Hey, Joachim from hell, I remember.
You said his name right.
That's because I have classical roots, man.
You said it. He's a friend of mine. I just call him Joachim.
Well, that's pretty good.
But you
it's better than Joachim. Yeah, Joachim.
Better than Yoko.
Yeah, names. Wow. People call me David all the time. They do. I can't figure it out. It's like
that is so funny. So
so that was my educational background, and then I left that school. So I actually technically did graduate from high school. Wow. And then I spent some time studying music at a music college in New York. But I never did matriculate in it. I lived on the Yale campus for half a year. I was dating a girl who went to Yale, and so I lived in the women's dorm, freshman women's dorm, surreptitiously. My mom called me the Yale ghoul, and then the dean of women had a sit down with me and suggested that it might be more appropriate if I found lodgings elsewhere. They talk like that in Yale, so I did. So I got an apartment in downtown New Haven, and the first weekend that I was there were 2 shootings and a stabbing right across the street. So that was where I lived for the second half of the year, and that was it. That was as far as I got. I never did go to college. I mean, I never did matriculate. I never earned a college degree. So I am not really a high school dropout, but I'd like to say I am.
Well, technically you are.
Technically I am. Yes. Yeah. So
see,
I can wear that badge of pride.
I walked out in 12th grade and never went back. And I didn't start my own school.
You see,
I didn't have the foresight to do that. How did you even think? You know what? I'm sick of your stupid curriculum and rules. I'm going to start my own school. Who does that at 16?
Right. I don't know. It'd be like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. I'm not going to play by your rules anymore. Right. So you and me and Steve Jobs, we're all in good company, all high school dropouts who then went on and did something.
I know. Brian Tracy.
I did not know that. Far out. Good company.
Thank God
So
for Brian Tracy, because that saved me. But
yes,
anyway, go ahead.
precedent. Good to have
Yeah,
precedent. So
yeah,
I mean, I had to sum up, because we were talking last night. You and I were talking about traumatic childhoods and
yeah.
overcoming hardships. I had the opposite of a traumatic childhood. I had a wonderful childhood. I had amazing parents that were incredibly supportive and that basically told me they were the archetypal baby boomer parents. I mean, they weren't baby boomers, we were baby boomers.
Yeah.
Parents of baby boomers who said, you can do whatever you set out to do. And I just believed them.
Wow.
The trauma part came pretty much after that. In my years as an early adult, um, in my first marriage, our first child died at the age of 10,
Mm.
which was an event so horrendous I couldn't believe it was happening. I was in absolute disbelief. I think for years afterwards, almost like not denial as well, maybe denial, disbelief, just like how could this happen?
Wow.
And the marriage fell apart. The first business I created fell apart, and I was forced into bankruptcy. And so all these things, bam, 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 sort of started happening to me in my 20s
Wow.
that that sort of showed me the darker side of life, I guess you could say. Um,
Wow.
and so
Wow.
that was my childhood, and that was my early adulthood. And I think it gave me both a lot of belief in myself in the first part, and then a lot of doubt in myself in the second part. Which has worked out to be, I think, a pretty good combination. I've always said to be a writer, you need to have the arrogance of a teenager and the humility of a Buddhist monk. You know, and I got that total confidence part in my childhood. And
Oh my
I'm not sure
God.
about the Buddhist monk part, but anyway, I certainly got some lessons in humility in decades that followed. So, and
I
then
can't.
it
I
took me
can't.
3 tries. It took me three tries, and you know this already. It took me 3 tries to figure out how marriage is supposed to work. And the third try, we have seen Anna show up today already on the show, has just been absolute bliss. And people say when they see us and Go Giver Marriage podcast, yeah, but that's the public side you're showing us. What's it really like? What it's really like is it's
That's
heaven. It's heaven on earth. We just adore each other, and
yeah.
we live a life where there is plenty enough difficulty coming at us from the outside.
Yeah.
We don't need to play it out on the inside.
Amen.
So we're happily on the same team, which is a good thing because life can be a challenge at times.
So, and let's just tell everybody the truth. You outkicked your coverage.
Is that what happened?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Anna is so nice though. And you are too. You're two of the nicest people on the planet. I think first off, I did not know about the loss of your child, and I'm so sorry.
Mm,
I can't wrap my brain around that one, nor do I want to.
yeah.
Um, so
But I have to say, it isn't something that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy if I had a worst enemy. At the same time, in the years that followed, I think that tragedy, and just about everybody I've ever met has suffered tragedy.
yeah,
When that happened to me, and I say it to me like it was aimed at me personally,
right,
because that's
right.
the way we often tend to view things. When that happened, I felt like I was the only person on the planet who could have suffered such a terrible thing. That, as it turns out, is not true. Um,
Yeah,
Almost every human I've ever met, there's this saying, the person you walk past in your street, be kind to them because you don't know what they're suffering. Well, you don't.
you know.
Almost everybody has suffered some kind of unspeakable tragedy, whether it is as dramatic as losing a loved one, or a complete loss of your bankruptcy, or losing a limb, or going through war, or whatever these dramatic things are, or less dramatic, the betrayal of a friend, the kinds of the years of cold indifference from a parent or a spouse, the kinds of tragedies that don't show up in movie screens, or I guess they do really, but they don't show up in headlines of newspapers, and they don't look dramatic on the outside, but they're just as damaging on the inside. We've all gone through it. We've all gone through it. And for me, the result was in the long run, it didn't make me a more bitter person. It made me a more empathetic person. I don't think that I was particularly empathetic at the age of 21 or 20. But I think it it deepened me as a person. Got deep, man.
You're 21 years old and I sitting around the pub having beers or whatever, and you can look at your friends or your people hanging out with you and say, hey, by the way, I dropped out of high school and started my own. Did you?
I used to say that all the time. Yeah. Great conversation starter.
But I just think that's mind blowing that you did that. Like, who at 16 years old thinks I'm going to just go start my own high school? It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So,
like a good idea at the time.
So you said in the midst of all that you started a business and it failed and you went bankrupt. What business?
Yes. It was a magazine.
I
didn't know how brutally difficult the publishing business is. It was a magazine that was focused around health, natural health, and environmental issues, and it was called Solstice. And it grew and grew. It grew very rapidly. I gobbled up a competitive magazine in a friendly merger, and all of a sudden it had grown out of my control, and I didn't have enough business experience or business sense or business running a business to know how to manage it. And so it got away from me, and soon I was in bankruptcy court.
So at some point, I don't know what point, but at some point you got into, and I actually know part of this story, so I know it was later, but you got into writing books. Between the bankruptcy and beginning to write books, what's the time gap, and what did you do in those years professionally?
I spent years. I spent years in the world of network marketing. Particularly, I was big in natural nutrition, and so there were nutritional products that I was just all enamored with on like the physiological health level.
Yeah.
And then I found out that there was a business side to that, and I never thought of myself as adept in sales, but I certainly did have an affinity for coaching and training and leading, and I loved that sphere. Yeah. And so I messed with that for years and made some money there. And then I got into writing about business and writing about sales, and writing about network marketing and writing about leadership in journals, in business journals. And I participated in or started a series of journals, which the common denominator in everything that I did was I was always the guy editing other people's stuff. So the short answer is I did a lot of editing. Some of it paid, some of it didn't. Most of it didn't, actually. Yeah. I put in a lot of years making money on my own in the network marketing world and editing stuff that I loved. Eventually, the editing started to pay a little bit, a salary actually, and that bled into helping people put their books together, editing books, and then ghostwriting books, and then co-writing books, and then that finally ended up with where I am now, which is authoring and co-authoring books. And oddly enough, it turns out this is what I was meant to be doing all along. I just didn't know it. I kind of stumbled backwards into my calling, into the reason I was put on the planet. Well, it took me 50 years, but
yeah,
you get there eventually.
I mean, Colonel Sanders didn't start KFC until he was like 66 or something, so the
white goatee. I should think about that. A white goatee. Is that what you're saying?
It would look great on you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
So along the way though, I mean, network marketing, especially, that can be, it can be tough to make money in that sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, no, it is. Yeah. It's brutally difficult. It's kind of like making money writing books.
Right.
You know, uh, it's hard to earn a living writing books, because it is brutally competitive. There's so much reading material out there. There are so many books out there. And honestly, to tell the truth here, like we were saying last night,
Unlike normal, go ahead.
yeah, that's right. Honestly, for a change, trust me when I lie. Um, honestly, most of those books don't make the author any money.
Right.
It's the rare author who is able to actually live on uh, a subsistence income, let alone become well off writing. So all of the household name, the famous authors, the James Pattersons and Stephen Kings and J.K. Rowlings and so on, obviously they're the superstars.
Yeah.
But even the lesser rung, the B rung and the C rung of all the people you see on the airport bookshelves, some of those guys are making money, but a lot of them are doing something else.
I always, I'm sure I would imagine you would, if you coach somebody about writing a book, you'd say, hey, do not quit your day job. Not yet. Not yet. I think that it's important to point that out, because it's a great calling card. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, if I'm going to coach somebody in writing a book, the first thing I'd say is, what's your goal? What's your purpose? Why are you writing a book? What is the outcome you want to see happen as a result of you writing that book successfully? Yeah. For some people, it's just to get the story out. I mean, and out to like family and friends.
Yeah.
I know people who've written a book and, a few hundred copies or maybe 1,000 copies have gone out to people that are in their sphere, and that's their legacy. And that's fantastic. That is a success story. It's not an income you can live on.
No.
But you might make back your expenses, which is from a economic standpoint is fantastic. A lot of people in your sphere, in the sphere that people that you often have in the show, are using a book as a calling card, like you said. Yeah. And that's a perfectly legitimate purpose for a book. You've got a book that basically tells your story, tells what you do, describes your business, describes your niche, describes your unique selling proposition, whatever it is. And it is like a business card with 185 pages or 200 pages. And that's great. You don't even need to break even on a book like that, because what you're doing is you're getting clients for your business. And that's great.
Yep.
Then there's people who want to write books because they want people to read the books, buy them. They want to sell those books and then earn a living from that. And that's probably the biggest challenge of all economically in authorship, but it's certainly doable. It's certainly doable.
Sure. J.K. Rowling, everybody's like, well, she was a struggling mom, that single mom that couldn't put food on, and she wrote Harry Potter and became a billionaire overnight.
Yep.
Which overnight. It really didn't go down like that, but it's definitely an admirable goal. I personally, I know what it takes to sell books, and that's just not one of the goals I personally would set. Like, not to earn a living, full time. And Joaquin, how do you say it?
Joaquin. That's such a great reason. I want to write a book because no one else has written it. And you just nailed it there. It's I don't know of any, well, before I even say this, I'm thinking of an exception to this rule, but I don't know of any authors who sat down and said, you know what, I want to become an author because I need to get rich. I need to make money. I need to make a big income. It's not a reasonable business plan. You go into writing books because you're burning to write books, because like Joaquin said, there's a book that no one else has written, or there's a story that you really love to tell, or you just love language, or you love writing, or and this is probably a biggest common denominator, you love to read. Lee Child says, I'm able to write one book a year, one Jack Reacher book a year, but I'm able to read 300 or 400 books a year. So which one do you think I prefer? Says, given the choice, if I had to give one up, I'd be a reader.
Yeah.
Man loves books. Yeah. And you need to have a complete love of books, love of reading, love of writing, love of language, love of words for this machine to hunt, for this dog to hunt at all. But yeah, and then to make money, you simply have to do it really, really well. You have to rise to the top of your game, which is the truth in any industry, isn't it, Ken?
It is. And you know what? I also think that along the way you can have a, boy, this is an overused phrase, but you can have a paradigm shift. I told myself for many years I hated to read books for many years. And then at 22, 1, somewhere in there, I read Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And I was like, I want a jet helicopter. Like, right. So, and I'm like, so in this, I say this all the time. I wrote this in a Facebook post the other day. Read every book you can get your hands on, every book, because the answers to life, somebody's already written about your situation. Somebody's written a book about it or written a blog. They've written about it. So read. And now today I absolutely love to read, but I used to tell myself how much I hated reading. I said that those conversations, I'm a horrible reader. I'm a terrible student. I'm blah, 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 blah. And then I had that shift.
God, I wonder what teacher created that in you. Maybe it wasn't a teacher, but okay.
Oh yeah. And she told me I would never amount to anything. I've written 7 books now and she's written 0.
Ha ha.
Right.
I think that would be the appropriate response. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I did it to tell a story that organizes experience thoughts, create a marketing program. That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
It's another great read. So John, what was the very first book you authored officially or co-authored?
I'll answer that question, but first I'll give you another thing, which is I too had my Awaken the Giant book. It wasn't a Tony Robbins book, but I always enjoyed reading. I read a lot as a kid. I read, like any kid, I read lots of stories, but as a teenager and then as a young adult, I read almost exclusively nonfiction. I read a lot of self-help books. I read a lot of books about leadership and about success and about this and about philosophy. I was big on philosophy, Oriental philosophy, Western philosophy. And my wife said to me one day, "You ought to read East of Eden." I think Oprah had just made it her book of the Oprah Book Club book. And we were talking, she was talking about it. And I said, "Yeah, I never read that." She said, "You never read East of Eden?" And I said, "No, I never did." There's so many books I haven't read, Ken. It's just, I could fill a library with the books I haven't read yet, and maybe I will. She said, "You really should read that." Exactly. She got it right. Not a boo-boo. The second stanza of which is, "Stick your head in doo-doo." That's what it is. In any case, there you go. So she said, "You should read this book." And because she's smart and I listened to what she says, I did. I went and I picked it up and I read it, and it blew my mind. It blew my socks off. It stunned me and amazed me. I didn't know you could do that. East of Eden is this epic that goes over several generations in Western US, and it's just an amazing, powerful story that had more darkness and grittiness and fascinating characters and shades of gray than I imagined could exist in a novel. So that started me off on novels, on reading novels. The first book,
that's fiction. I've never read it.
And it is fiction. It's a magnificent epic of multi-generational epic. And of those 30 plus books you mentioned, 28 or so are nonfiction. Most of the books that I've written have been nonfiction.
Yeah.
I've just now made that switch to fiction in my writing too. That same switch that I made in my reading has finally bled over into my writing. Thank heavens.
Wow.
I loved writing the nonfiction books, but I look at it as my schooling. I look at it as my high school, my undergrad, and novels as my grad school. You asked the first book I ever wrote. Technically speaking, the first mainstream book I wrote, like not sort of ghosting or assisting in some other marketing books. But the first real book that I wrote was The Go-Giver.
Wow.
It wasn't the first published book because it was rejected by over a dozen publishers. And before we took it back to New York a year later, I published another book, which was a memoir of a friend, a kid who's 30 years my junior, Cameron Johnson. The story of a 19-year-old self-made millionaire. It's a great book. It's called You Call the Shots, and the subtitle is The 19 Essential Secrets to Entrepreneurship, or something like that.
Wow.
And this guy, Cameron, he wasn't 19 when we wrote it. He was like 24, I think, or something. And he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. I can't really say kid anymore. He's in his 30s, and he had made his first million while he was in high school. He'd started over a dozen businesses, and every business he'd ever started had been profitable. I want to read that one, says Jill.
That's my wife, by the way.
Oh, it isn't? Of course, there's walls. I wish it were better known, that book, because it's really a great book. And it's his life story, and is told through these 19 secrets as told through his life story and the story of his businesses. And it's a wonderful book. So I think it's still available in paperback on Amazon. You Call the Shots. And then the second published book was the first book I really wrote, which was The Go-Giver with Bob. And The Go-Giver more or less established my career as an author.
Wow. That's incredible. And The Go-Giver, when was that? What year was
2008.
8.
Came out in 2008, and about 9 months after it came out, the economy tanked. Lehman Brothers, et cetera, right?
Oh yeah.
And underwater houses, and so interestingly, we kind of thought, well, we had this lovely little parable about putting other people's interests first, and all of a sudden we're in an environment where people's houses are underwater and their 401ks have evaporated, and all hell is breaking loose. And I don't think people are going to have time for a lovely little parable about putting other people's interests first. Much to our surprise, the book took off.
Yes.
It actually increased. And what I learned from that was that in times of great stress, times of great catastrophe, after coping with the immediate situation, people's next response is to start looking inward and getting introspective. People start to re-examine what's important to me. When you've lost a lot that seemed like it was meaningful, you start asking, now what really matters to me? Some people have had this experience just having a near car crash, right? You're going through an intersection and this car just misses you, and you pull off to the side and you're still shaking from adrenaline. And what do you start thinking about? First you think, oh my God, he could have hit me. I'm okay. And then the second thing you start thinking about is all the things that matter most to you, the people you hold dear, the things you're living for, the things in your life that are worth living forward, the things you haven't done yet that you want to accomplish. It's like, you get down to your basics. And that's what happened in 2009. And The Go-Giver started to gain a following. And then, what happened from there. The Go-Giver has sold over 1 million copies.
It's crazy.
Bob and I wrote additional books in the Go-Giver series.
Yeah.
And as you know, the latest of which is with my wife, Anna and me. Anna and I wrote the Go-Giver Marriage this year.
Phenomenal book.
So that one little book planted a seed that's still, very much living today. Still in all, for me, all the nonfiction books are, like I said, are like my schooling, and I love them, and I'm happy to be an alumnus of them.
Yeah.
And now I'm a novelist. That's what I believe. I think everybody was put here for a purpose. By the way, I first heard that from David Bach when David and I started working on our book back in 2009. Actually, wow. David had that idea for a book, and he approached me, and we started to work on it. 2008, actually, in I think the summer or fall of 2008, David approached me about that, and I had interviewed him for a business magazine earlier, and he had said something on that interview that really struck me. He said, I believe that everybody was put on this earth for a unique, special purpose that nobody else can perform. And to me, the great tragedy is that most of us aren't doing it because we're too busy leasing and chasing, leasing our lives and chasing an income. So we don't have the financial security or this financial stability to go do the thing we were put here to do. That's what I'm here to change. That was his mission, was to
Wow.
give people the tools of financial freedom, not become a millionaire, not, own an island, not pie in the sky, get rich quick, but financial security, financial stability, financial freedom to the extent of the ability to do what I was put here to do,
Yeah.
which usually doesn't take massive amounts of money, but it does take, 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month, or, whatever. It takes something that takes your basic nut to get handled, 5 grand a month, whatever that is. So I was very struck by that. And I always kind of wondered what I was put here to do. And I began to realize it was writing of some form. But once I hit novels, we talked about this bad boy last night.
We're going to talk about that
That's
more too.
that's the deal, man. That made my life go click.
I gotta tell you, back, I saw Bob on Grant Cardone's podcast or something.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and I'm like, I like that guy. And I literally, like, I did some research and found a phone number to Burg International or whatever.
Yeah, Burg Communications.
Yeah. And so I call it, and Bob answers, and I'm like, wow. And so
that's because all the staff were out that day.
Right. I know. Right. And so it surprised me, and I had a great conversation with him, and I I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking, like, man, I think your book, I mean, I've always been kind of a giver myself personally, trying to help people and whatever. But back in 2016 or 17, when when did I start the show? 18, I guess. I think that your book is part of the reason that this show exists.
Wow.
The Go-Giver. And because I remember thinking, we were going through a bunch of crap, and I'm like, you know what? I just need to start interviewing people and hear how they got through the hard times and help them tell their story, and my story will change along the way. I just intuitively knew that, but and it's happened. I have a platform where I give people the ability to come on and talk and tell their story and promote their stuff. And as a result, and I mean, outside of you, I charged you to be on here, but I don't charge anybody else.
You don't charge the others. I'm hanging up right now. Where's the off button? How do you turn this thing off?
So no,
honey. Where's the off button, honey?
You play it so well. I love it. So, but I think that you've inspired me and many, many, many other people, millions to be exact, to have a better life. And that's pretty freaking cool, man.
That is an incredibly gratifying feeling. Yes, that is great. And the book has been there for a year, but what's also for a decade, but what's also been there is all the people, the community, the readership, and comment after comment after comment, with, hey, there's Tom. Thank you, Tom. Anna had such a great time yesterday with that interview. I told you this. Great guy. So many readers have written over the years and told us, this book made a pivotal difference in my life. Well, what a gift that is. I honestly, Ken, I feel like every book that I've written is a gift that's dropped in my lap. And, for the last 6 weeks, I've been really struggling with, I'm writing book 3 in the Fin series. And it's always like this at this point in the process. There's a struggle that goes on where I'm sitting in my chair every morning at 5 or 6 in the morning, and I've got a pad of paper, and it's like I'm trying to figure out what the story is, but what it's more like is I'm trying to sort of get out of the way and let the story come through. I don't want to sound too woo-woo, like I'm a trance channeler or something. It's going to be Abraham writes the story or something. But it's something like that. There's this story that, that wants to be told. And the Go-Giver, just to me, it felt like I had just been, when Bob approached me about writing that, I had just come off of a many months long screenwriting course with a amazing teacher in Hollywood, a guy I'm still in touch with and who I give all the credit to for all kinds of. He's one of the two writing teachers I've ever had, and he's magnificent, Hal Crosman. And so I just come off of Hal's courses in advanced screenwriting technique, and so I was sort of bristling with. He'd had us doing a lot of exercises, a lot. I'd written tons of scenes. I'd written tons of scenes that will never be seen in movies or TV, but they were really, really fun. And so it's like all my tools were out and all my spidey senses were tingling, and I was kind of like an engine raring to go with it, needing a road to run on. And Bob said, "I'd like you to write this book with me." And I was like, "Okay, boom." And it just felt like a book that was waiting to get written.
You were like, "What took you so long to call, Bob?"
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's so awesome, man. So talk about and we did an Amazon Live last night. And we talked about your newest book, which is right here in my palms. Cold Fear.
Man, they did a hell of a job with the cover. Yeah.
And so talk about, I asked you a question, and for those who didn't see it last night, shame on you for not watching, but
what's the deal?
Right.
What's up with that?
I asked you a question. I said, out of the 30 plus books that you've written and co-authored, how many of them have been fiction? And you said 2.
These 2. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, really, all the parables are fiction. And I said this last night as well. I mean, all the Go Giver books and Out of the Maze, the Spencer Johnson book.
Again.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Hi.
There you go. Yeah.
Cold Fear. This is the first book, and it just came out in paperback a few weeks ago. So Steel Fear was the debut of this novel series. This is book 2, which just came out last week in hardcover. And all the parables are fiction, but I think of them as sort of miniature novels, but they're not generally regarded as fiction. This is fiction, novels. So this is it. This is my and switching from nonfiction and everything I've done to fiction feels like, putting down the clarinet and picking up the violin. It's like a whole switch of careers, a whole switch of tools and techniques and everything. So it's really been a blast.
So talk about the newest book. Talk about you've the Cold Fear. And you co-authored that with a Navy SEAL by the name of Brandon Webb.
Yep.
And talk about how that series, Steel Fear, was the first one you just showed. How did that even come about?
So back in 2009, Go Giver was just, a year and a half old. I got a call from my literary agent who had a guy walk into her office. This is when Captain Phillips, right in the heels of the Captain Phillips rescue, this dramatic thing that we've all seen the movie now, right? This is before Captain Phillips was Tom Hanks. He was just Captain Phillips then.
Yeah.
And he'd been rescued by these 3 SEAL snipers who'd taken these 3 coordinated shots and taken out these 3 pirates. And everybody watched it happen on CNN. And my agent turned to her sister. They were watching TV and said, they were doing an interview with a guy who had trained Navy SEALs and was describing what kind of training goes into these guys.
Yeah.
And she turned to her sister and says, "I want that guy as a client. How come I can't get that guy as a client?" And then 3 days later, that guy walked into her office and said, "I need an agent." And that guy was Brandon Webb.
Wow.
He was not only a Navy SEAL sniper, he also, after he came off active duty, he was tapped to head the sniper school with a friend. The 2 of them completely reworked the sniper school for the 21st century. So he had a fascinating experience there. He wanted to write a memoir, and my agent gave me a call and said, "I know you don't do this kind of thing, but military book, but I thought I should let you see it." And I was like, "There's no way I am not doing this. This is so fascinating, so totally foreign to me. I knew nothing about the military. I never served in the military. I had great admiration, but no experience." So we clicked, and we wrote that memoir. It was a New York Times bestseller. That book is called The Red Circle. And Brandon and I clicked so well as a team that we went on to write another half dozen books together, all nonfiction, memoirs of different kinds, and so on. The last one of which was called Mastering Fear, which is a book about applying principles gleaned from the world of special operations and entrepreneurship in your life on mastering fear. In that book, I outline a 5-step process of what it takes to not be beaten back by a fear, not try to ignore a fear, which never works, but to actually go through the fear and harness it to your benefit, to partner with it.
Wow.
And that so that 5-step process for mastering fear, that book, Mastering Fear, kind of led to the novel Steal Fear. It's called the Fear series. Steal Fear is a story that is not really based on, but inspired by a series of real events that happened in Brandon's career back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And in short, it was when they had just integrated women into ships like this in battle roles, female jet pilots birthing on a birthing means sleeping, not giving birth.
Right. Right.
On an aircraft carrier was a brand new thing. And there was a sexual predator on this aircraft carrier. He was on for 6 months, this 6-month tour. There was the sexual predator who was molesting women in the dark. He would like run in, switch off the light, molest them, leave.
Wow.
As bizarre as that sounds. And it happened 6, 7, 8 times. They never caught the guy. And at the time, Brandon thought, well, man, what if these were murders? Because the staff of the ship was in no way equipped to deal with any kind of serious crime. That's not what Navy, what a aircraft carrier crew is trained to do.
Right.
So he had this idea for a novel.
So, but wait, that's a true story. That actually, that the sexual predator is a true.
That's a true story. That actually happened on the ship that
Okay.
Brandon was on, which was the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is this ship you see right here.
Wow.
And he thought, what if it were a serial killer? He had that idea. He brought it to me, and we sat on it for 10 years. I said, I definitely want to do that at some point. But it took a long time before, until I had the time, frankly, and felt the confidence to tackle a full-fledged novel, let alone a thriller. Also, the story didn't have a hero. And so I spent years thinking about this guy, Finn, who he would be, this damaged, wounded, traumatized Navy SEAL, who in Steal Fear is dropped onto this aircraft carrier for reasons he doesn't fully understand and nobody else seems to know. And he ends up being the guy who is both tracking the serial killer and suspected by some of being the serial killer.
On the ship.
On the ship. The whole thing takes place on the ship. The entire story takes place on the aircraft carrier.
Wow.
It's not really a military book per se. It's really a thriller. It's a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
By book 2, which is this takes place in Iceland, Cold Fear, in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, the northernmost, battling hardcovers, the northernmost capital city on Earth. It takes place between Christmas and New Year's in Iceland. And Finn has landed there in pursuit of some people that he thinks will provide some answers to these terrible things that have happened, some of which he remembers and some of which he can't remember. He has holes in his memory. But while he's there in Iceland, he gets embroiled in the sudden and mysterious death of a young woman who drowns herself in the prologue, and nobody knows why. And Finn himself becomes completely engrossed in trying to find out why, and he doesn't even know what it is about her death that draws him so, but he's compelled to investigate that, and at the same time becomes a suspect in that. So he gets mixed up with an Icelandic detective. It's my version of Nordic noir, taking place in Iceland, and it's a thriller, psychological thriller. There's mysteries, there's action. It gives you all the vocabulary and all the things that a really engaging thriller should do. It's also, for me, a study in humanity. And I mean, all the Finn books are a study on humanity.
Yeah.
I said this on your show last night, but I was recently asked on a podcast. So Cold Fear, is this one based in reality or is it pure escapism? And I was like, Wait, those are my only two choices?
Right.
Because I'm not picking, none of the above.
Right.
I don't buy this thing that fiction is pure escape. To me, the implication of that idea is that your life is wretched and miserable and meaningless. And
Right.
you pick up a book or you watch a movie to give you some way of escaping for a few hard-won moments out of the wretchedness that is your paltry existence. And when you finish the book, you'll be dropped back to suffer in reality again. I don't like that picture. I don't buy that picture.
No.
To me, great fiction, like that East of Eden that Anna had me read so many years ago, great fiction engages you and gives you tools to engage in your reality. It's not an escape from reality. Yes, it is in one sense. It takes you away into a foreign place. When you read Cold Fear, you're in Iceland for 400 pages. When you read Steel Fear, you're on an aircraft carrier for 400 pages. And so there is this, you are transported into another world
Yeah.
and other people's lives. In that sense, yeah, it's an escape, like traveling is an escape. But most of us know how nourishing to the soul travel can be, right?
Yep.
People say you want to learn about life, you want to grow yourself as a person, travel,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
That's what a good story does. You travel in that story.
Yeah.
But when you come back, when you arrive back home, when you close the covers and you've read the last page, I believe you should be a different person than the person who started. You're inspired in a different way. You have insights you didn't have before. It's what happened to you when you read Awaken the Giant.
Yeah.
That was nonfiction. This is fiction. Doesn't matter. Great writing is great writing,
That's right.
or good writing is good writing.
Great.
So
Great work.
that's they're stories about humanity and about the complexity of humanity. In a sense, Steel Fear is a book about leadership. It asks some big questions about leadership. Cold Fear is in a sense, a book about friendship, loyalty, and betrayal, and it asks some big questions about those things.
So I've got your website scrolling across the bottom, webandman.com.
Yeah.
Everybody watching should go get a copy of this book. It's over on Amazon. Last night it was down to $25.20, I think. I don't know where it is today, but I got to tell you, like, you have, and I told you this before, and I mean it. You're one of my favorite people, and your wife is amazing. I love both of you. I think that, I'm curious what your answer to this question. I ask this question on every show. And that is, in your years of being in network marketing and everything else that you've done, you've I'm sure had you've come across a lot of people. And what do you think, in your assessment, what do you think is the number one thing that holds people back from really having it all in life? And I'm talking financially, because I've been broke and homeless, and I've been wealthy, and wealthy's way better. So I mean, it just is. But what stops people from having massive financial success and joy and peace and freedom in life? What do you think it is?
Belief in their own limitation. Belief in their own limitation. And for so many of us, that belief was fed by, like your teacher, was fed by people telling you what your limitations were, which they just made up, which is BS.
Yeah.
But still you believed it, because that's what we do. We believe what people tell us, because we're good people. We're naive, we're gullible, we're looking to learn, we're hungry for knowledge. So we believe what people tell us, and they tell us you can't do that, and we believe that. I'm so grateful that we tried to start a high school, because we didn't believe that we couldn't do it. But I've had a lot of beliefs about my limitation. I still struggle with many of them. belief that I don't have enough time to do something, belief that something will be too difficult, belief that it won't be possible to earn enough money to do this or that. I mean, those are these beliefs that we have. They're usually formed over long periods of time and repetition, so they
Yeah.
don't vanish like that. But vanish they must, or dissolve they must, for us to go forward. But I think that is the number one thing that holds us back. And often you can see it in the language that we use. One of the things that Brandon did in that sniper course, he thinks the most significant change they made all kinds of changes in the sniper program, but the most significant change, they brought their attrition rate they had a dreadful attrition rate, and they brought it down to almost zero. They started graduating every candidate in the school. They started graduating instead of dropping out half of them.
Wow.
They weren't better candidates. It was better training. And the biggest, most significant difference was he had a program of mental management. And it was about self-languaging, how people would talk about don't miss, don't miss, don't miss. And they would miss.
Yep.
Right? Don't miss, don't miss, don't miss. They would miss. They relanguaged that. And that's what we got to do, is like relanguage our thinking and our view about ourselves, because that's what holds us back, is the mask we're wearing that we built ourselves.
I don't think there's anything more important than what you just said. I think, I really don't. I think that people, we have a tendency of painting life with the brush that someone else has given us, whether it's our religious beliefs, our what you said, our self abilities, I mean, we paint our lives with someone else's brush. And I think that it's putting that brush down and finding your own, and you can have anything you want in life.
And by the way, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself in your life is to surround yourself with people, or even a person, who feeds limitlessness, who feeds your understanding of how far you can go. For years, Anna used to tell me, "You'd write great novels." And I would say, "Thank you for the vote of confidence." Translation: I don't believe that. I did not believe that. I thought that was an impossible thing. She kept saying it. Guess what? She was right.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it was possible, but it turns out that it was. Most things are.
Yeah, Anna is a great cheerleader for you.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
I
So
married a cheerleader. Does that make me a football star?
that you're the star quarterback. Are you kidding me?
Hey, I always wanted to be a star quarterback.
John, I'm honored to have you on again. I'm just, you're an amazing human being, and what you're doing for the world is incredible. Jeffrey Wolf just got your book, so congrats, Jeffrey.
Excellent. All right. Enjoy.
Anna says you're a stud. There you go. That's a horse, isn't it? Or
quarterback, stud. I'll take them both.
Quarterback, yeah. So one last question: if there's somebody watching, when the whole pandemic and all of that, and we kind of touched on this before when you and Anna were on, but suicide rates skyrocketed, just absolutely skyrocketed globally. For someone watching that may be like, man, I've done everything. I've literally tried everything to pull it all together, and I can't figure it out. And they're hanging on to life by a thread. What do you say to them to help them? Because you and I know that it's going to change. It's going to get better. But like, what do you say to somebody to convince them, like, dude, just hang in there. It's going to, like, what would you say to them?
Oh man, that's a hard question. I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is to put your finger on what's important in your life. Find what's important in your life. Figure out what's important in your life, and cling to that like a piece of driftwood, knowing that the waters will recede. But what is that piece of driftwood? Is it painting pictures that, even though they don't earn you any income? Is it a person? Is it, Anna and I clung to each other. I mean, is it a teacher? Is it reading? Is it something you love to do? Is it something you love to study? Is it whatever it is? Find the thing that is most meaningful to you, and cling to it like driftwood, knowing that the waters will recede.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Everybody watching, go pick up a copy of Cold Fear. And you might as well go ahead and grab Steel Fear as well if you haven't read it.
Hey,
But pick up the newest book that by John David Mann and Brandon
I
Webb.
do want to say that if you haven't read Steel Fear, you don't need to in order to enjoy Cold Fear. Cold Fear is the second book. It comes afterward, but Steel Fear will read just as well as a prequel. You can read them in either order. So don't feel like you have that limitation. Like you can't read this new book until you've read the old one.
That's so awesome. And you've got some great praise on the back of this. I hadn't even read. You've got Lee Child. What?
Again, one of the nicest men on the planet. Such a gentleman.
All I can say is look out, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have the quarterback.
Quarterback's coming, man.
John David Mann is coming for you.
That's right.
No, you're awesome, man. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing and just being who you are.
Well, I love being on your show. This is just always have a blast with you. Appreciate you, you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. So stay with me if you would, but I am going to end the live stream. So if you're watching and you haven't shared this out, and look what Jeffrey says. See, I'm telling you, man, it's coming.
From your lips to Louis B. Mayer's ears.
Yeah.
Well, he's coming. Dead, but
yeah.
It is actually in the works. Either streaming TV or feature film. It's not decided yet, but it's coming. We'll have news, I believe, within a few months on this. So
that's so awesome.
Stay tuned.
Can I have your autograph?
Yeah. Hey, on that site you mentioned, right there, Webb and Mann, you can actually buy autographed copies. Brandon and I just signed them together last week in Manhattan. It's autographed copies of Cold Fear on the site. Yeah, right there on the site.
I'm gonna have.
We had a book launch at the Mysterious Bookshop in Tribeca last week, and we sat together and signed cartons of books.
That's
They're
so
waiting for you.
Wow. So go to webbandmann.com with 2 B's and 2 N's, webbandmann.com and get a signed copy. That's freaking awesome. I did not know that. Guess what I'm buying? My wife's still watching. Guess what I'm buying today, honey? Anyway, John, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And everybody watching, please share this out. If you shared it, share it again. It's not going to hurt anything. Just help the algorithm. So thank you.
There you go.
John, thank you so much. We'll see you guys later. Have an awesome day. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.